Mercy, Human and Divine, a reflection for the seventh Sunday in Ordinary Time. Today's first reading from 1 Samuel 26 recounts an episode in the life of David during the period between his anointing and his ascent to the throne of Israel. The charismatic king-to-be has turned from court favorite into hunted fugitive. Jealous King Saul cannot abide the existence of the one who embodies his own fall from God's favor. Hoping to eliminate the threat to his throne and somehow change the course that God has set, Saul pursues David to kill him. Yet these two share a complicated history and kinship ties. Killing one another is not so easy. In fact, this passage describes David's second opportunity to spare Saul's life and shame him for his unjust pursuit. By this time in the saga, King Saul has given his daughter, Michal, David's wife, to another man, and David has secured additional alliances through marriage. But when he finds Saul asleep in the tent, he does not take the life of his enemy, but instead treats him with the justice and faithfulness appropriate to kin. Of course, he does take the spear and the jug and gives Abner an earful when the sun comes up. After today's reading ends, an emotional conversation takes place between king and king-to-be. Ever the player, young David plucks Saul's heartstrings and extracts an apology of sorts, though he knows better than to trust in the king's fleeting remorse. In Psalm 103, we find a familiar formula drawn from the very mouth of God. Merciful and gracious is the Lord, slow to anger and abounding in kindness. This language refers back to a theophany, a divine-human encounter, in Exodus 34, when Moses experiences the presence of the Lord and comes down the mountain glowing. On that occasion, the Lord speaks in clear self-reference. The Lord, a merciful and gracious God, slow to anger and rich in kindness and fidelity. Jesus challenges his disciples, and us, to aspire to the divine compassion spelled out in Psalm 103, to go beyond the self-protective code of the world and treat enemies and strangers as kin. The golden rule, do to others as you would have them do to you, sounds rather reasonable compared to be merciful just as your Father is merciful. But the latter expression unlocks the final section. Only God sees into the heart. Only God knows the motives behind human behavior. That puts only God in a position to judge, and yet God's mercy puts all of us to shame. Reading his audience, Jesus anticipates the objections of those who still image God as a harsh judge, the gotcha God that inspires overwhelming guilt, self-loathing, and in turn, meanness toward others. His final exhortation, stop judging and you will not be judged. Stop condemning and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. Leaves no wiggle room and sets out a clear path toward a more generous and happy life. The notion of aspiring to the compassion of God in all our dealings with others might just shed some light on St. Paul's conclusion at the end of the second reading. Just as we have borne the image of the earthly one, Adam, we shall also bear the image of the heavenly one, Jesus.